Welcome to our webcast today on progressing your career as a company secretary or other governance professional. I am Stephen Partington and I'm joined today by Evan Elstein, who is an associate of the Institute and Company Secretary of Evolution Mining. By way of background, I am the Company Secretary for 10 Network Holdings and I've been a member of the Institute for approximately 25 years. During that period of time, I have participated on the New South Wales Branch Council and also on the Corporations and Legal Issues Committee. Currently, I'm also a course director of the subject known as Corporate Accountability, Meetings and Disclosure, which is part of the Graduate Diploma of Applied Corporate Governance. This afternoon we will chat with Evan. This presents us with an opportunity to hear experiences of a governance professional who has paved a career as a company secretary. You will have the opportunity to ask questions through your webcast moderator during the course of our presentation, and we will seek to address your questions just prior to the conclusion of our presentation. We will discuss Evan's governance career to date, the lessons he has learnt, his education and the courses that he has undertaken, and I also look forward to hearing Evan's views in respect of governance in the modern company and how he intends to further his skills in the future. Welcome, Evan.
Thank you, Stephen.
So tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, as you mentioned, I'm the Company Secretary of Evolution Mining. I didn't start out in mining and I didn't start out to be a company secretary. My career actually started out as a chartered accountant, working for an IT company. And I did that for a number of years. My first real foray into the company secretarial field was my first role as a company secretary and CFO for a listed Australian company. I did that for a year and then I decided to get back into something that I really enjoy, which is IT. I did IT consulting for a number of years. But then I realized there was something that I was missing. I actually enjoy the excitement and the pace of a listed entity and the governance around that. And an opportunity came up in 2011 to combine my passion for IT and a company secretarial role. And that's where I am at present.
And so when did you decide to do the course through the Institute? What stage was that in terms of your career?
So fairly late in my career. I did the course in 2012 and finishing in 2014. What drove me to do the course was really I'd reached the point where I had a lot of hands-on practical experience, but I needed to consolidate my knowledge and really get the certification behind my name, and also that would provide my career with longevity in the governance field.
And how did you find out about this particular course, the Applied Corporate Governance course?
I think throughout my working life I had been provided with materials that came from the Institute. They were certainly the leading field in promoting governance issues and bringing governance issues to light. And for me, it was really an obvious choice to go with the Governance Institute to further my career.
Right. And so you started the course, as you say, sort of 2013.
Yeah.
What subjects were offered as part of that course?
So, as a chartered accountant with a finance background, I got 2 credits for the finance courses, which I didn't need to do. But recognizing that those finance courses or the chartered accounting credits needed to be current within 10 years, which I had done. So I did the four courses, which were risk and compliance, applied corporate law, corporate accountability, and corporate governance.
And you did that because the Institute offers a number of different options of being able to undertake study.
Yeah.
You can either do it in a face-to-face class format, or alternatively you can do it online. And it really depends, I suppose, on each individual's circumstances as to which is the preferred course that they may undertake. How did you do your course?
So I certainly knew knew the benefits of attending the actual lectures. I had done a course by correspondence before, and I knew what I'd missed out on. So I chose the lectures, attending the lectures, which I did once a week.
Mm-hmm.
And that seemed to work well for me, because I think if you're able to attend those lectures, you do get the benefit of that engagement, that classroom interaction with fellow students, also the opportunity to engage with the course presenters and ask questions, which you really miss out on if you do it by remotely or by correspondence.
And just picking up on that comment in relation to the course presenters, you would have had sort of 4 different course presenters. Can you give us a view as to what their backgrounds were like and how they brought any relevant experiences to your particular sessions?
I think the course presenters came from a different backgrounds and different areas of the governance field, and that variety really helped to generate interest, and you got to interact with the different styles and experiences of the course presenters. Some of them were from a legal background, some of them were from a risk background, some of them were from a finance background. So really having a different flavour for each course really helped to create some of that richness that you got in the course, attending those courses.
So a lot of them were actually working professionals in that regard, who were able to bring presumably real life experiences into the course and sort of share those with the students?
That's right. So we had a combination of guys that are in academia, either university lectures, so well versed in the latest regulations and changes in legislation, and there were presenters from industry that, as you say, were able to relate their real life experiences in the governance field.
All right. And obviously it took a bit of time during the course of your week to attend both presentations and also to do some study. What's your estimate in terms of what people should be looking realistically to set aside on a per subject basis?
I don't say that I had the winning formula, but what worked for me is to make sure that I had read most of the material before the lecture, so that you had a grasp of what the concepts were that the lecturer was going to cover. Mm-hmm. Some of the material is voluminous, if I can say. And you may not be able to get through all of it, depending on what role you have in your working life. But I certainly endeavoured to cover most of that material before the lecture, and as soon as possible after the lecture to do a 1 or 2 page summary, because those summaries really come in handy at the time it comes to do your assignment and your assessment at the end of the semester.
And just sort of to amplify that a bit more, I mean, say the essay or the assessment assignment was due midway through the course, and you had then an exam at the end of the 12-week period.
Yeah. So there is certainly a method as to how the course is structured. That assignment comes in at the halfway mark and covers most of the material up to that point. So and it requires quite a deep dive into that material. So by the time it comes to the semester end assessment 6 weeks later, the first half you've really had a pretty good understanding and grasp of all the key concepts there. You've had feedback on how your assignment went. So you've really got to focus on the last 6 weeks of the course to make sure you've covered all the material.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the course materials, you've mentioned that they were voluminous, but you found them very useful, obviously, in providing you with a background in relation to the subjects that you covered?
Yeah, I mean, there's the course is really well. The course material is really well structured. You've got the online summary by the presenter, a video summary. Mm-hmm. So if for some reason you missed the lecture, or you want to get a feel as to what the lecture was about, the presenter provides a very brief video summary. I wouldn't recommend that is the only thing you need to do. There are lecture notes, there are case studies, and there are questions. And I would suggest the lecture notes are fairly easy to get through. You'd fairly quickly hone in on the key concepts. Mm-hmm. Attending the lectures would also help you to understand where the emphasis and where the important aspects are that you would need to understand in a lot more detail. Right. And the case studies add that level of depth and analysis that you would need to answer the assignment questions and the assessment at the end of the year.
And having done the course, how relevant or how useful is it to your current role?
I found it particularly useful. Two examples spring to mind straight away. At the time we were doing the director's duties and responsibilities, we had two new directors join our board, and I was able to add some relevant material to the induction process, and to make sure that our existing board members also had a refresh in terms of their duties and responsibilities. So that was one instance. The other instance, the risk and compliance. Coming from the mining industry, we have a big focus on safety and compliance. And the risk module really provided me with additional context and framework as to the whole risk management process. Right. And I was able to share that with our risk committee and our risk manager, which was something that was appreciated.
And I assume also probably the corporate governance practices and the corporate governance principles generally. You've had to roll those out, and no doubt you've been able to rely on information that you picked up from your course generally in that regard as well.
I have, yes.
I've got to say, my own experience just in that regard is that as you say, sort of a lot of the areas on the risk have obviously become far more topical for modern public companies over the last, I'd say, 5 to 10 years. I know I found the course very useful in that regard, in terms of sort of seeing how people need to identify risk, how they need to address the risk. And it brings a whole new light, I think, to directors generally in terms of their evaluation of decisions associated with the operations of the company, when they sort of start to see in a fairly palpable way the different risk factors that might affect the business, and sort of then also sort of see how those issues can potentially be addressed. I think the other area that I know from my own course I've found quite useful, having had the benefit of guest presenters who come in, relates to sort of things such as the conduct of general and annual general meetings by public companies. We've been fortunate that we've had a couple of people out of sort of some of the registry spaces who have been able to provide us with some interesting stories associated with how other companies have had general meetings and some of the issues that have come up during the course of those meetings, and how people sort of might address them for the future. So, yes, it's interesting in that regard. And so, on the whole, you would sort of see your course as being of great assist to you in your current role?
Very, very much so. I think, just picking up from some of the points that you've made, governance has certainly come to light in the last 10 to 15 years, on the back of the much publicised corporate failures both here and abroad. maybe 15 years ago, governance wasn't really understood or didn't have the right place within an organisation. But I think it comes to a matter of trust, and stakeholders want to trust the company. And if they could see that a company has the right governance practices, protocols, and standards, that would be a company that they could identify with, and whether they want to be an employee of that company or a shareholder in that company, it certainly goes to the values and ethics of that company.
All right. And having now completed your course, sort of out in the big wide world, so to speak, what are you doing in terms of keeping abreast of modern developments in the governance space? How do you sort of keep up to date with, obviously there's a lot of learnings and a lot of changes that are happening. How as you as a practicing company secretary keep up to date in that regard?
The Governance Institute really makes that easy in that regard. They have the online newsletters. Their website has some rich content on there. They have a hard copy publication which they also send out to members, and you've just got to keep your ears to the ground all the time. There are articles in the press that are of relevant. There's developing case law that you need to be across. There are discussion papers in terms of changes in, for example, share option schemes. So there are always things that are changing all the time. You certainly can't live in a glass bowl and pretend that nothing else is happening around you. You have to have your ear to the ground, and as I mentioned, the Governance Institute does facilitate that very well.
And the Governance Institute's website, as you say, is quite a rich area in terms of assisting both students and also practicing company secretaries. I know that there are not only the articles that you talk about, but there is obviously a library of other precedent documents, for example, which might be of use to practicing company secretaries, at least as a first port of call in their day-to-day arrangements and sort of workings. The other thing I know that I found quite useful with the Institute was sort of participation in some of the committees, and there are a number of different avenues in that regard. So I mentioned earlier the Corporations and Legal Issues group. There is also a Public Companies group, and I know those particular committees have often been involved in looking at emerging legislation particularly, and also trends, and basically participating in the various submissions which are made to the relevant bodies on behalf of members of the Institute generally in relation to where those particular developments should be heading.
Yeah.
As you mentioned earlier, there are a number of articles in the press which are in fact issued on behalf of the Institute, which are very much cutting edge in terms of the developments in the corporate governance space.
That's right.
I think the other thing that the Institute obviously does, and sort of would assist everyone, is the seminars that they regularly present. They have an annual sort of seminar, but they also have half-day and sort of lunch hour seminars, quite often on topics which are relevant again to the governance space.
Yeah, just picking up on that point. The Governance Institute places a big emphasis on continuing professional development. So once you've got your graduate diploma or your accreditation and you're an associate or a fellow of the Institute, your journey doesn't stop there. You really need to, the onus is upon you to make sure that you're kept up to date, and that doesn't mean just looking at their website occasionally, but their actual a certain number of hours that you need to do to make sure that your continuing professional development is maintained. So that forces you to keep up to date with current trends and developments.
And do you have any other thoughts in relation to the course generally? How did you find the interaction with your fellow colleagues in your courses?
So,
Sorry, maybe I can head you off. In terms of the students that were doing the subject at the same time, what areas did they come from? Was there a broad spectrum, or was it from a narrow sort of sector?
It tends to be from a broad spectrum. So you have, there are a lot of students, I think, that come from a legal background that want to take their careers in the governance direction. They may have been general counsel and they need to, make that shift to that company secretarial role as well. There are students that come from a finance background, such as myself, and there are students that are really the accidental company secretary that need to formalize and consolidate their knowledge. So it's really a mixed bag, and that does make for quite a rich discussion in those lectures. I tended to study on my own, but I know that there were students that they may have been at the same company or doing it at the same time, or may have known each other outside of the course, that tended to work together. But different strokes for different folks. Depends what works for you.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose just looking at that also. So you mentioned that there were discussion groups, obviously, which people could participate in, that would obviously have assisted in terms of preparation for assessments and also for the exams.
Yeah.
What other resources did you sort of use in terms of your course? Was there anything else that you specifically recall that sort of assisted you in terms of your studies?
I'd say the key for me in my studies was being at the lectures.
Right.
Because often, each presenter had a different style
mm-hmm.
and a different format, but where the presenters, as part of the course notes, there was a question, case studies at the end of the course notes, which we usually covered off in class at those lectures. And some of the presenters got you to work in groups to work those case studies through and then present your answers back. And I think that really helped to develop some independent thinking and analysis, and to understand what the course presenters were looking for in terms of a response and a structured answer. And
presumably also assisted in terms of preparations for exams.
Most certainly.
You mentioned that you did 4 subjects because you got credits for 2 of the subjects. Yeah. How many subjects did you do a week? And what was the duration of your course having regard to your workload?
So I did 1 course per semester. So a semester is 6 months. Mm-hmm. So it took me 2 years to do the 4 courses. There are some students that did more than 1 course per semester, in which case you would typically have your 2 assignments due within the same week, and you'd be writing two exams at the time of the final assessment. But I found that I wouldn't be able to balance that with my work pressure. I tend to do quite a bit of travel. I also wanted to have a bit of a home life. So it all depends on where you're at in your career, what flexibility your employer has, and what your priorities are. But it can be done. But my experience was 1 subject per semester was ample.
And I think that's very important to probably the audience generally to understand that obviously their own lifestyle and their demands need to factor into any consideration associated with sort of how they study online and also the number of subjects that they are required to study online. Because as you've also mentioned, obviously it is reasonably time consuming in terms of not only the presentation, the weekly presentation which you're required to attend in class, but obviously the work that's required around that, both in preparation for the class and also to complete assignments.
That's right, Stephen. And I also think what's relevant, certainly for a lot of the students, is that this is probably the first formal course that they're doing after finishing university a few years prior.
Very true.
So, getting back into that study mode takes a bit of adjustment. So if you've had quite a long break between your university studies and doing this course, you need to allow for some period of adjustment.
No, I think that's very true, and that's a comment that I know is fed back to me on quite a number of occasions.
Right.
Sort of, to some extent, there's a bit of a shock, I suppose, in terms of turning around and getting back into the study routine again. Whilst they've sort of done it obviously through a lot of their courses in the lead up to doing the institute, there is quite often that gap, and it does take a bit of an adjustment process. But I think provided you're recognising of that and sort of obviously prepared to put in the time, then you can easily accommodate that in terms of completing the course.
That's right.
Evan, is there anything else that you would like to say in relation to the course generally, in terms of how you found it, or in terms of your career otherwise as a company secretary?
Look, for me, if I look back on my career has really consisted of 3 phases. And the first phase was, really focusing on my chartered accounting background, where I had a number of finance roles. The second phase was when I had an IT flavour to my career. And this is the third phase where I've got in my current role as Company Secretary and VP of IT and Community Relations. And I've only done the course recently in this latest phase of my career, and it's really benefited me immensely because I've been able to consolidate all the practical and sort of on-the-job knowledge that I've gained over a number of years, and given me that foundation to go on from here.
And in terms of your course, how have you found that in terms of your interaction with your board and with senior management?
Maybe I can answer the question this way, and if I haven't answered it, come back to me.
Sure.
The governance role in a modern company is one that cannot afford to sit in your office, attending to minutes and the more admin component of your role. You really need to be out and about. Both the board and management are expecting you to be that voice of compliance, that voice of confidence in relation to compliance, and to use you as a sounding board for governance-related issues. So you sit in the middle between the board and management, and as a governance professional, it's really important that you have a broad understanding of the entire range of the business, as well as the regulatory environment in which that business operates. I'm sure, in your role as with Channel 10, the regulatory environment would have been fairly complex, as it is in my industry, in the mining industry. So having that broad understanding of those industry-related issues is important, and both the management and the board are looking to you for guidance in that area. And
has your board or senior management sort of, I suppose, recognised the fact that you've done the course and the benefits that the course brings to your organisation?
If you're asking, do they treat me any differently? The answer would be no. But I do think that they realise that there was a change in the quality of the conversations that I was having with them, based on the knowledge that I was able to bring back from the course, and I'm certainly more confident and more on the front foot in having those discussions, having done the course.
Right. Okay. We might now take the opportunity of seeing if there's any questions which have been received whilst we've been doing the presentation. And I've got a question from Leon from Melbourne, and he's asked me to ask you, Evan, what are some of the challenges that you face in your current role?
The main challenge for me is being able to balance my different roles because I have three very distinct roles. I've got my role as company secretary and my role as head of IT and my role as head of community relations. They're each very different and very distinct, and it's just been able to balance my the conflicting priorities. But I'd say the company secretarial side of things, the governance side of things, takes up the majority of my time. So yeah, it's just been able to balance the conflicting priorities.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. We don't appear to have any other questions, so we might look to wrap it up again. Thank you again, Evan, for your full and frank answers today. I hope that our participants have enjoyed the discussion, and I thank them for their interest in and viewing this particular webinar. We also have pardon me, some additional resources that you can download at the end of this session. I should also add that the Institute is now taking enrolments for its cornerstone course of study, which is the Graduate Diploma of Applied Corporate Governance. The Institute has also recently expanded its offerings with the launch of 2 new world-class postgraduate risk courses. As the Governance Institute has as its goal to give members the support they need to achieve career aspirations so that they can become part of the background, or more correctly, part of the backbone of Australia's corporate community. Our members are world leaders in governance and risk management, and we are proud to promote the expertise and professionalism of our sector both locally and overseas. By providing the best education and support for governance professionals, we will drive responsible performance in the Australian corporate sector. Thank you for your time today.